podcast. My name is Rhiannon. I am a knitter living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I have a lot of new viewers. I'm really thankful to everyone who has hit that subscribe button and who has shared my video or liked it or commented. I especially love when you comment because it feels like we're really in conversation with each other versus this being kind of like a one-way transaction. So again, my name is Rhiannon. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I recently relocated to the Midwest. I'm a West Coast girl, born and bred, grew up in California, moved to Oregon, lived there for a good 20 years, and now I'm here. So welcome in. I like to start by saying I'm an intermediate knitter as well, because I think that a lot of podcasters are very experienced knitters, people who've been knitting for 20, 30 years, or maybe they discovered knitting in college and now they're about my age, so it's been a good long while. For me, I've only been knitting 6 years now, so I think it was 2016 when I really, maybe like December 2015 when I really picked up the needles. Maybe I don't understand how time works or math, and I'm saying that wrong, but I'm pretty sure I just passed my 6-year anniversary. So if you can do backwards math, good, because apparently I cannot. So I have no confidence in what I just said, but I tell you that because I want you to feel like this is a space that's welcoming for people who are new to knitting. And I also want to encourage you, if you have any questions about anything I say or terminology that I use, just ask me, just comment and ask, because I remember being a new knitter and not really having people in my regular day-to-day life who were knitters or fiber people at all, and feeling like I didn't understand half of what people were saying when I would go to the yarn shop and they would say, well, what's anyway, what weight of yarn are you looking for? That's the example I was thinking of, and I would be like, I don't know, I want to make a sweater. What weight of yarn do you need for that? So I think that, one of the things that I hope to do is to provide a little bit of educational content, but I don't want to do that in a way that is like replicating what other people have done, or, creating tutorials for things that, someone else has done it better, or, I don't want to assume what it is people want to hear from me in terms of educational content. So I just started teaching knitting at Cream City Yarn, which is a local yarn shop here in Milwaukee. It's a beautiful store. I highly recommend shopping there if you are in the area and you need to buy some yarn. And I had my first class this month. It was so delightful. So for people who've been, following me for longer, that I had just been hired to teach at a local yarn shop in Oregon before I moved here. And I didn't know exactly when I would be moving. It was, we moved because there was a job offer and, we needed to be here by a certain date. So, I ended up not ever getting to actually teach those classes there in Oregon. So it was a little bit of a, oh shoot, I missed my opportunity. But then as soon as I knew I was going to be here by a certain date, I reached out to this yarn shop and I said, hey, here's my situation. I want to teach knitting. And they were really nice, and it happened to align with when they needed to find more teachers. So I feel really welcomed by them, and I feel like it was pretty serendipitous that I was here when I was. So I taught a class that was cabling, confidently, and helping people learn how to read charts and cable with charts, and I feel like it went really well. So That's a little bit more about me. I am also kind of a knitwear designer. I have only published a few patterns. I have a lot more that are in various stages of development, and I might be giving a little bit of an update in some of these episodes, but that's kind of all about me. I live here with my wife, and we have a cat. I don't know what else to say about me. My favorite color's blue, and you'll figure that out. You'll figure out more as you watch. But thank you for being here. I appreciate so much everybody who takes the time to watch these, because I know there's a lot of people putting content out, and the options are kind of endless. So it's really an honor to be part of your day. I have a pretty packed agenda, and I knew this would happen because I sort of decided to step back from doing an every 2-week podcast around the time that we moved, because it wasn't feasible during the moving period. And then also looking at 2022, looking back at the last year, what I did and what I think a lot of people did that I'm hearing a lot of is that maybe we bit off more than we could chew. And that, it was a year where people started out with high hopes, and, TikTok was full of sea shanties, and we were like, hey, second year of the pandemic, we've got it nailed down this time. And then, kind of the hopefulness wore off, but the work was still there, right? Everything, all of that stuff we bit off. So, yeah, I think a lot of people are tired and that's kind of the main emotion that we're all feeling is tiredness. So I'm not putting a lot of pressure on myself to deliver a podcast every 2 weeks. If I had something to share, I would share it. And that's kind of how I've always done this podcast, where I don't have a lot of commitments and rules. I do not intend ever to monetize it, because I don't want it to become work. I want it to remain play for me and something I enjoy. And so, just kind of setting that other boundary of, I think I'm going to go back to my original format, which is once a month. And so there's going to be a lot of content this time around, and that's what happens when you wait, several weeks between podcasts. But, if there's a long episode of a podcast that I'm watching, I just pause it when I need to do something. So that's pretty much, what I can say in my defense if this ends up being like an hour and a half. Okay, so let's dive right in. I'm gonna be drinking tea. I have my teacup from the Tate Museum of Modern Art in London, England, which is somewhere I got to go in the before times, fortunately. And just to tell you a little bit about this mug, what I really love is they had a bunch of products where they got famous artists to design something like a mug, but they don't tell you who it is. So this mug with the paint drips, we have no idea, but it was a famous artist. Okay, and the tea inside of it is one of my favorite teas. It's Montana Tea and Spice Company's Evening in Missoula. So this is a really nice, it is kind of like an evening blend, but I think it's an all-day blend when you just want to be kind of calm. So it's got chamomile, rose hips, lemongrass, peppermint, spearmint, lemon. It's got a lot of other things, but it's a little spicy. It's a lot herbal and a lot, what it really reminds me of is the smell, especially like bubble gum for children, like bubble tape, it definitely, that mint, you really get that. And then it's sweet. However, the flavor is not too intense. If you want it to be really bubblegummy and intense, you steep it for like 8 minutes and you'll get that. But in the beginning, it kind of starts out milder, of course, and you can brew it stronger. But I just thought I'd share. I don't always talk about what I'm drinking, but today I really need fluids, so Okay, so let's talk about finished objects. I have a lot of finished objects because I've been working on a lot of really small things. So the first finished object is this pair of scrappy socks that I made. These were kind of my combining different leftovers of different sock yarns to make a pair of Christmas-esque socks. So, you know, not really Christmassy especially, but they do kind of have like a, you know, pepperminty kind of vibe, I guess. I forgot that I really cannot wear a sock with 64 stitches. So I think these are gonna end up being a gift for someone if I can't shrink them, because, so it's gonna have to be somebody whose foot is bigger or round, and maybe not a lot longer than mine. But essentially these just came out really huge, and you can see that gauge is small. I don't know how to make my gauge much smaller. I used a US size 1.5 needle, and I thought that would be adequate. I think if I wanted to make this needle size work for me, I would have to cast on 56 stitches, which is something I've done in the past. I've also used a US size 1 and cast on 60 stitches with some degree of success, but I am not great at knitting socks, and something that I plan to work on. And I like that they're small enough that I can sort of go, oh well, you know, I'll get better. Although I will say it took me like an hour to weave in all the ends on each sock. I don't know, maybe on both. There were a lot of ends because these color changes are, this is 3 different yarns. So yeah, it was rough, and I won't go over what the yarns are because I talk about these more in other episodes. And yeah, I would love to know if you have any strategies for making socks fit better, because something I struggle with is that if I go down on the needle size too much, then my ribbing, the top edge tends to be too tight, but then most of the sock fits really great. I know that there are stretchy cast-ons you can do. I definitely like cuff down socks way better than toe up. I just do. And I think my ribbing comes out nicer. I've talked about this before. The ribbing I do at the beginning of a project always looks nicer than the ribbing I do at the end. So I'm not really sure if that has to do with the weight of the project pulling on the yarn or what, but essentially yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement on those socks. So, okay, so, you know, as I've mentioned, my hands are cold here because it's very cold right now. I think the high today is like 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which is probably negative something in Celsius. So I was looking for an easy pair of mittens to knit. So I found this pattern that a friend was teaching a class on called the Miller mittens, and I made these. I didn't weave in the ends yet because I didn't really love how they came out. This yarn is Neighborhood Fiber Company's Studio Bulky. It's really nice. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think this is one of those yarns that I bought and then I made a sweater, frogged it because I was like, I don't think bulky weight sweaters are right for me in this climate. And so now I have leftover yarn, but it was a really cropped small sweater, so it's not enough to make a sweater out of now. You know, and I should say if I'm going to make a bulky weight sweater, it's probably going to need long sleeves and be like a full length, because I could actually wear that in this climate, but I don't have enough yarn of this. So it's going to just show up in other little projects. So I took some of that yarn and I made these mittens, which then I didn't love. And it's not that I didn't love the pattern, I think the pattern is a really good generic starter, and it's a free pattern. So I think my expectations of free patterns tend to be pretty low. Not in a negative way, but I just don't think people need to do that much work to give you something for free. I think the point of free patterns is to kind of, what they're giving you is really an understanding of like the components of a mitten, which is what I really got out of it. And so after knitting these, and obviously I didn't even make them the same size because I did the first one and it was too small, I immediately thought, you know, I think I want a denser gauge. I think I want a smaller or a lighter weight of yarn. I think I want a mitten with like a little more shape in the thumb. That was my kind of biggest hurdle with this. And I wanted a mitten where the thumb gusset didn't start immediately after the ribbing. So this is the thing. Here is, you know, obviously like the bottom of my hand. If the ribbing comes all the way up to here, it tends to just pull up because I think there's that little space where maybe your hand is starting to grow a little right here, but it's not quite your thumb yet. So here's kind of thumb and up, and then, so I started riffing on this, and I was joking in my head that these mittens I was making were the Miller Lite because they are worsted weight instead of bulky. But I live right by the Miller Brewing Company, and so, you know, it's just funny to me, you know, it's very Milwaukee, the Miller Lite, right? And my wife wanted some mittens that, she's been wanting mittens that have kind of like a flip top where it's convertible to, you know, either a full mitten or a fingerless glove. And so this was kind of my prototype. I made this for my spouse. It's got the full thumb, and something I did is I, after I picked up stitches for the thumb, I decreased a little just to give it a snugger fit around the thumb, because I think that sort of, I don't like that clumsy, thick feeling on my thumb. And I kind of invented this fingerless glove. So because I was calling these the Miller Lite, in my mind, I was very, very influenced and inspired by these mittens. And I decided I'm just gonna release this as a free mitten pattern, because I think that, you know, it's not something, I didn't reinvent the wheel. There's no chart to it. There's no design really, other than it's just a solid mitten. So again, this is my prototype here for a worsted weight mitten. I made these kind of by trial and error, and I feel like it's pretty neat that I can do that. You know, I didn't know that I could just do that. And I think that's one of those things that if you grew up in the knitting tradition of just winging it, or just understanding basic shapes and pattern blocks, that feels like nothing. But if you grew up in the tradition, I guess, like me, where it's like by the time I came to knitting, it was like using patterns and just live this kind of post-Ravelry world of there being lots of tutorials and patterns and things. So you do learn a little bit more hand-holdy way of knitting. So to invent things feels sometimes not so approachable. But yeah, so made that, and I thought it would not be hard to also release a pattern that's 3-in-1. So you can get just a fingerless mitt, you can get a full mitten, or you can get the flip top like this. And one of the things I really wanted it to have is to be button free, although you could potentially, you know, put a snap on there. I guess I should hold it up to the camera, put snaps, and then, you know, that could snap back. I don't think it's necessary, and I think there's enough weight to it that it sits back nicely. So then here was my first kind of like test knit of my own prototype, and I made just like a full mitten for myself. I went down a needle size, my gauge got tighter. I still think it could be a bit tighter, but I think for a full mitten, you do want it to be a little bit loose, you know, you don't want it to fit like super fitted, I guess, because the important thing is just that it stays on your hand. And that's where I also think having a little bit of space between the cuff and the thumb gusset helps it so that it doesn't want to slide off your hand. I still think that because this is super washable, I could go down another needle size. So I'm going to be test knitting my own pattern. And if you would like to test knit it, get in touch. I would love to have you test it out. I'd love to see what people come up with as like kind of their ideal gauge and how, you know, tight it is. And the pattern is really, it's written up now. It's more of a recipe. So I do give you like a stitch count. I'm using 36 stitches, but I do also have like points in the pattern where I say like, you know, you might experiment with doing fewer or more stitches here, or you might, you know, lengthen this area between the wrist and the thumb gusset based on your hand. So it's really more of a recipe for you to just try it on as you go, just try it on frequently and figure out like, does this need to be longer or shorter here? Do I need the thumb, you know, to be even narrower than what the pattern says? Do I need the overall mitten to be narrower? And you know, my goal is just to write a solid, free pattern for worsted weight mittens that will help people figure out how to make the right mitten for them. And also, you know, give you the option again of fingerless glove or convertible or just a solid mitten. So 3 pairs of mittens, but there's more. So meanwhile, my friend Susan was looking for test knitters for her own fingerless mitts pattern, the Towy, which is a fingerless mitt that's all ribbing, and it uses a sport weight with a mohair. So you get kind of like a DK weight, a plump DK weight gauge, or I guess fabric. So I have been having the time of my life knitting and planning Towy mittens. So let me just back up a little and say that, like I mentioned, in 2021, I bit off more than I could chew with knitting, and I was casting on every time I felt like it. It seems I cast on things when I knew I probably shouldn't have. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's a good reminder that self-care is not self-indulgence. So self-indulgence is casting on all the time. Self-care is knowing that future me is going to be very overwhelmed by having 3 sweaters on the go, 2 of which have cables, charts, you know, like are detail rich, and 1 of which is a fingering weight sweater. So, you know, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of stalled. And I am just sort of taking a step back, and I'm trying to rediscover kind of like the joy of knitting, which sounds weird because obviously if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. But there comes a time, I think, or times in your knitting career where you start to maybe get ahead of yourself, right? And that's what I was doing. And I just needed just to take a step back and not take myself so seriously and rediscover like playing and knitting in a way that's like not so serious, not so intentional, right? It's just like, I like this. This is fun. I want to do this. So for me, the Towy mittens have really given me back that playfulness, the kind of like joy of knitting. So I I just have to show you now. So this is the first pair that I did. And you can see there's kind of a color block effect. What I did is change the color of mohair. So, you know, it's the top half and the bottom half are just reversed on either mitten. So like I mentioned, this is a fingerless glove pattern. It's going to be released on Saturday, January 22nd. So by the time this video is up, it will probably be out. It's called Towy, which is it's a regional word from, oh gosh, like Prince Edward Island, I think. Some of the Canadian islands, where Newfoundland, maybe that's it, Labrador? Anyway, Suzen is from a region of Canada that has a lot of islands, and it's the east coast of Canada. So it's a word that's like a part of the regional dialect, but Towy is something really soft and really, my impression, you know, a very like, just like soft, fluffy thing. Like it could even be like you would describe a cloud that you can't physically touch, but you know, it's very fluffy. So these mittens are just delightful. And I think this is going to be something that I just always have on my needles. I didn't have to do a special cast on or bind off. I just knit ribbing. The increases are very simple. It's the same for left hand and right hand. So there's so much about this pattern that I think it is very simple and pared back in all the right ways so that it becomes a blank slate for you to kind of dream and imagine what you want to put onto it. So like I said, my first pair, this was actually the first one I knit, and I started out with this color combination, and then I just was sort of intrigued by this color combination. So okay, I have a massive bin of yarn in my lap. Not massive, but pretty big. And so this is all the yarns and mohairs. So the first is, this is Retrosaria Vovo. And actually I have a bunch of the tags here to help me along. So this is one of those colors that it's just called number 7, you know, but it's kind of a grapey, it's kind of a grape color, I guess, wine must kind of color. And then I paired it with a mohair from Sandnes Garn, which is also just a color number. Sandnes Garn tin or tine silk mohair, and the color is 5042. So obviously these are colors I enjoy, as you can tell from the sweater I'm wearing, which is the Astragal I knit at the beginning of last year. So I was, you know, really enjoying this, but I had actually bought this yarn and this mohair together because I was going to swatch them to see if that was something I wanted to knit into a sweater. Oops, that's not that. That's something else. So this one is the Biche et Bouche mohair. It's called like dark burgundy gray, which feels like a weird name for a color that's clearly purple. And I don't know why it's called dark burgundy gray, but I think if you mix burgundy and gray, it becomes purple. So that's what this pair of Towy mittens is made with. And I just reversed, again, I just reversed it. So the bottom half has more of a lavender tint and the top half has a little more red to it. Then I made a pair, well, actually I cast on one mitten and then I knit another mitten in another color combination in this wonderful blue that looks to me almost electric. I don't know if the light is going to do it justice, but this is a combination of Holst Tides, which is the wool silk blend in the colorway, what's this colorway? Nightshade. So it's 70% wool and 30% silk. So wool silk blends are like my absolute favorite yarns, I think, for a lot of things. And the blue is the Shibui Knits Silk Cloud, or Shibui Silk Cloud, which is 60% mohair, 40% silk, and this color is blueprint. So these are two pretty, I would say, different colors, but when you put them together, you get this pretty stunning blue that, again, to me, it almost looks electric because of the way that the brighter blue in the thinner strand kind of like livens up, and it's almost like sparks or something. So I knit like one in this color, and then I knit this one, and then I knit this pair. And then I had to go back and finish the others. So I still have one of the blue ones as a work in progress. And yeah, I just was like having so much fun putting colors together. So this here is a combination. These are actually a pair that I knit for my spouse. This is a combination of a mystery gray yarn that I had in my stash with this mohair that has a very gentle color fade. And I think it's showing up on the camera pretty well. There's kind of like shades of green and purple in this mohair. And then at some points it's very light gray, almost white. So you get a different effect on either mitten, which I really love. So this mohair is from Sugar Bush, and it's called Drizzle. It's actually 76% mohair and 24% silk. So it's got more halo, and I think you can really see that. This is the one that was only 60% mohair, and that's the halo, and then this is the one that's 76%. So you see, very, very fuzzy, very warm. And again, this gray yarn was a mystery. All I know about it, all I remember is that the tag, it was a British wool. It was one of the like, it's 100% wool. It's a British something. And it was an undyed, like, you know, it was gray off the sheep or whatever, right? Maybe they blended different fleeces together to get that color, but it was an undyed one. So here's the remains of it. I wish I knew what this was, because it kind of drives me crazy. I save almost all of my ball bands and tags because I want to remember what I used, right? And I will remember which ball band goes to which yarn. So I have a distinct memory of this having a ball, not a ball band, but like a tag that was like a brown paper with just black ink, very simple. I feel like the words Kent and lamb's wool were in there somewhere. I have no idea what it was, but anyways, I have like a whole pouch full of the ball bands of like all the yarns I've ever used. And I started doing this a couple years into my knitting journey because it helps when you want to go back and figure out what something is. So because of that, I know that this is the Dusty Rose mohair from Knitting for Olive. And yeah, so I have all these mohairs. I tend to just kind of like buy random skeins of mohair sometimes and just wonder what I'm gonna do with it. It's just a thing I do. I don't know why. But I wanted to show you kind of the cool thing with this pattern and just with like color play that I've been doing. So let me pull that chair out and put that down. So in order to kind of come up with new color combinations, all you have to do, if you have some leftover yarn, I mean, and this was one skein of the Retrosaria, and I got 2 mittens, and I have probably half to a third of the yarn ball left. And yeah, I did cake it up because even though it's one of those that it's like you could just knit off of it, I don't like those like this shape. I feel like then when you pull the yarn, it like does this weird floppy thing and it doesn't just like roll off easily the way it does from a cake. So I end up caking those up anyway. And like I cake up this mohair even though that, you know, was also, it was in this shape before. So I don't really love knitting right off the ball in that shape. So anyway, I just have been taking some yarn. So this is some old like Jamieson and Smith from a sweater I knit a few years ago. And I combined it with this burgundy gray color. And I just started stranding them together and rolling it up in a ball. And then just by doing that, you can really get a good sense of what that color combination would look like in a mitten. So for example, here is the color combo that this part of the mitten is made out of, and you can see it's pretty accurate. So, you know, if you're kind of questioning if a certain color combo is gonna look good together, you can just kind of roll them up in a little ball and then you get a sense. So here's where I tried to take that same Jamieson and Smith and combine it with the Knitting for Olive Dusty Rose, because these two colors are really pretty together when I hold them like that. But when I do that, I don't know, I feel like it kind of doesn't make my heart sing, and it certainly doesn't look different enough from that it makes me want to cast on that. So I've just been rolling up yarns together just to see what they would look like and how the colors would look together. And I recently saw on a podcast where somebody took a really contrasting mohair, like almost like they had like a navy mohair with a white, ooh, this is getting messy, with like a white yarn. And so, you know, you can even figure out what would that look like, you know, is that gonna look, it's gonna give you a marled effect for sure. But say I wanted to take the, you know, these two colors that are very different, I just start winding them up like this, and pretty soon I have a little knot that tells me that this is actually going to look kind of gray. The overall effect is going to be kind of like a blue gray if I do the blue and the white. So I think, you know, just if you're like me and you have a bunch of like leftover yarns and scraps and things, like this is a really fun way to play with color and to figure out, you know, like if I wanted to make mittens that had like yellow, what color could I mix with them? What happens when I put, you know, this yellow and this pink together? Like, what does that look like? You know, I can start just rolling it up and get a sense of, you know, how that looks. Not good in my opinion, but you know, just a suggestion. If you are, you know, looking for something that will bring a little bit of playfulness to your knitting, then I highly recommend this pattern. And I have plans for so many more. I think I'm actually going to be pairing this with this because I think that it will give me a really like vibrant red that's not too orangey. I don't like orangey reds. I like pinky reds. Okay, a bug just tried to land on my face, so that's where we're at. So moving on from that, I have a couple of other projects that I wanted to share. So for the month of January, for my sort of renew and improve goal, which is, I said it was going to be like a make along, and I still want to have it be a make along, but I know that the making app is doing a mend along or something. And so I want to make it low pressure. I love contests and prizes and stuff. I love the like random winner thing because it's like, it's so non-judgmental, and it's not like someone's subjective opinion of who deserves to win. It's just like, maybe you win, But anyway, let me know if you still think it's worth doing this as a make-along. And if not, that's okay. But I just wanted to kind of challenge myself to like every month do something where I transform something in my wardrobe. So it could be mending, but it could also be, like just taking an old shirt and cutting it up into squares for a quilt that I'm gonna use at a later date. The point is just, for me, it's like, how do you give things a new lease on life rather than put them in the landfill? Because even if you donate clothes, they often end up being more or less dumped. So yeah, it's like if we can just sort of keep them in our homes and like find a new purpose for them or something, I think that would be better. But it's also about like creative expression and like, say you knit yourself a solid color raglan and it no longer gives you joy. Can you like embroider on it or something, do some Swiss darning to make like a cool pattern or like what can you do to transform that object? So I had a pair of jeans and they're just like all of my jeans. They are from Eddie Bauer. I do not buy like tailor-made, bespoke jeans, and I don't know how to sew jeans, although that's a long-term goal. But like a lot of things, I often have to hem my pants, so I'm pretty short. So I decided that since I was gonna have to hem them anyway, I was going to do something kind of interesting with them. So I took some fabric that I had bought at the Pendleton Woolen Mill outlet in Portland, and I sewed it on the inside hem. So here's what it looks like when I don't fold that up. You can kind of see that there's a line where it's sewn, but if I just wore it like this, then these are just regular length pants. But I love to cuff my pants, so I can cuff them a little and you get a little bit of a fun pattern of this wool, because these are just like literally the mill ends of blankets and scarves and things that Pendleton makes. Or I can cuff it a lot and have this fabric showing. My one caveat, I don't think I've washed these in the machine yet, so I'm curious if the wool is gonna shrink. I'm a little nervous, but it's woven and it's already felted, so I don't know what could happen. I think I'm gonna maybe not put them in the dryer and just see if that, is okay. Like the first time I'll try, because I always wash them with cold water anyway. But, I'm glad I did this anyway, because I just was like, why have a regular boring pair of jeans when you can have jeans that have a little fun kind of peekaboo pattern? And you can see I didn't try to match the pattern because this was just a scrap end. So yeah, that was my first project. And my second project along those lines, I wasn't anticipating doing this one yet because I set myself a goal of doing this once a month. Was I just hemmed the cuff of a sweater. So one of the cuffs of my Weekender sweater, Weekender Light, got torn and I mended it, and I have a little video that I'm gonna insert here showing how I did that. So my sleeve cuff had torn in part of the bind off, and the first thing I had to do is go back to the beginning of the bind off and rip off to the point that it had torn, which is where that needle is. I just sort of hold the stitches carefully and pull gently on the string because this is a pretty rustic wool. This is Brooklyn Tweed Loft. And the stitches don't run down, which is really one of the main advantages of woolen spun yarns. And then I went and picked up all of those stitches on one of my smallest DPN needles, and I didn't really worry about picking them up, you know, in the right order. I just pick them up because if you get them backwards, then you just have to knit or purl through the back loop. Essentially, it's that same kind of movement. Or you can rearrange them and then, you know, go through and get them. So once I got to the point that the stitches were ripped off, those are the stitches that were initially loose, I actually frogged or ripped back a little bit farther so I'd have a nice long tail. Once I had that yarn tail, I could pick up my stitch and start knitting back. Now, because I didn't have any more of this yarn that I had used in the sweater originally, I stranded together a brown yarn and a blue yarn because this yarn has, it's a kind of smoky brown with blue tweed effect. So by combining those two and then spit splicing them onto the end of the yarn, I was able to get myself a good long tail to complete the bind off. Originally, there was a tubular bind off for this cuff, but I just went ahead and did a standard binding off in pattern because I really don't think you can tell the difference, and I wanted this to be you know, a pretty easy repair. So I had a couple of options. I could have actually ripped back an entire row and bound off one row earlier. I also could have done a contrasting color bind off to be sort of a visible mend. And I just opted for what felt like the easiest way. And, you know, I didn't really want this sweater to have a different color on it. So I just went ahead and, you know, tried to match as best I could. I think it worked. The end result is pretty subtle and not super visible, but very sturdy. Okay, so in addition to the make along, I am hosting a KAL, just year-long knit something blue. That's all you have to do to enter. Knit something blue, use the hashtag knitblue2022 on Instagram, tag me in it. If you're not on Instagram, comment below and we'll find a way to include you, because I'm not trying to exclude people by having it on that platform. That's just the easiest way for me to do it. So my goal this year with blue is just, I've accumulated a lot of blue yarn. It's my favorite color. Most of my summer clothes and like warmer season clothes are blue. Like I love wearing blue all day, every day. And I do a lot of like blue with like black or white or gray, you know, pairing it with neutrals. I do blue and red a lot. I do, you know, just blue has to be in like every outfit I wear. And that's why I wear blue jeans a lot, honestly, because they're blue and they're pretty comfortable. I mean, you know, in the before times I thought they were incredibly comfortable, but you know, elastic waistbands have been more and more prominent in our lives in these last few years. So there's that. So yeah, so Knit Blue 2022 for me is just about kind of celebrating that I love this color and I should knit with it more, because I found that I was buying a lot of blue yarn and then not actually knitting said blue yarn. So the first obviously is I'm doing these Towy mittens, but I also started a project that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And even though I have plenty of things on the needles that I could and can work on, I wanted to cast on something for this KAL that would be kind of like start the year off on the right foot. So I cast this on. This is the Solverv shawl by Skeindeer knits, and it's a really beautiful garter stitch crescent shaped shawl that's worked from end to end. Oh, I really like how that's showing off the lace right there. And it's worked at a very loose gauge. When I block it, I'm going to be blocking it really aggressively, so it's going to be even looser of a gauge. And I love the way that this pattern has a pretty minimalist, I would say, lace pattern, where it's a, you know, it's a pretty simple repeat, you know, but you get this really beautiful edging from it. And the edge goes from one end to the other. I think that's really cool. And you're not having to pick up stitches or anything. It's knit all in one piece, so I love that. And I also really love how it has this really great loose gauge with garter stitch, because what you get is almost like an accordion-like effect if you look at the fabric up close. I absolutely love it. So I'm knitting it with not the suggested yarn, which is not unusual for me to kind of make maybe some questionable choices with yarn substitution, but I think this one's actually turning out really great. I mean, look at that, it's beautiful. So rather than using a very rustic woolen spun sport weight yarn on a size 10 needle, what I am doing is using a very, very, very thin lace weight yarn, held double. This is Veil by Brooklyn Tweed. The color is Sashiko. It's this really deep, deep blue that looks like if you dipped something in an indigo pot 400 times. It's really deep that in certain light it almost looks black, but when the light's on it, it's definitely blue. And I love the way this yarn feels. So I bought a whole bunch of this yarn at one point because I was like, oh, lace shawls. I'm going to make so many lace shawls with lace weight yarn. And then, you know, kind of swatching it and playing around with it, I found that it really works up nicely held double. The strands almost like just melt together. So I want to talk about like what information is on this tag. So just to give you a sense of what I'm working with here. So this, what I was drawn to is that this is a really like soft, springy lace weight yarn. It's very lightweight. I mean, for 50 grams, you get 450 yards. So I have lace weight yarn that is like half of that, or I don't know. You know, I think 450 yards for 100 grams would be a very light fingering weight, right? So this is like twice as light as that. You would need 900 yards of this essentially to make up 100 grams. Like that's nuts. And it's American Rambouillet wool. It says it blooms a lot when you wash and block it, and I am going to be blocking this pretty aggressively, like I said, just to kind of stretch out that garter. So I went down a needle size because I felt like it was giving me the fabric I wanted. And, you know, as I learn more about knitting, yes, you can change your the gauge of the project as long as you understand what the consequences are and as long as it's what you're going for. So because this is something that I will wear this shawl really like a scarf more than anything else. It's not going to be draped artistically around my body while I pose. It's going to be wrapped around my neck while I am, you know, outdoors in the cold. So, and I might wear it around my shoulders on a summer evening with a light dress, but chances are it's really going to be more of a winter scarf for me. And so I really love the having something that's very lightweight and airy and lacy, but like wool, and it traps that warmth because you get kind of the look of the bulky scarf, but not the feel, right? It feels very good to me to have something kind of light and airy around my neck. And so I yeah, I mean, this says it's worsted spun, but I swear it's so fine. I don't know how you would know. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how I made this cake. So when I do a double-stranded project, I strand them together in a cake. And I know that may be a hot take. Some people will tell you to never do that, but I made it happen. And here's a photo of how I made it happen. So I have an Amish style Swift, and what I did is I just basically, I caked up the 2 individual skeins, and then I put each skein kind of behind the Swift with the strand running between those pegs, and then used that so that they were evenly tensioned. They were both the same distance and angle from the winder. And I have also heard and found to be true that the first wind, so the first cake that you make from a skein of yarn, is going to be too tight, and so you need to recake it. So I've been doing that now. So I make, I cake up the yarn, and then from that cake, I just wind it again, because what happens is that there's so much tension and pulling for it to come out of that skein that that's why you get like the yarn barf in the middle. That's why you get those cakes where it's like almost conically shaped, and then the farther you pull down, it becomes more and more like cone shaped instead of like a I don't know, cylinder, puck. I don't know. So this one, you can see it's not like bulging out of the top or bottom. It is a little bit leaning this way, but it's really pretty uniform. And you have a lot of definition without things being very tight on this skein. So yeah, I've caked it together. I'm working on my scarf. I think that's all I have to say about that, but yeah. The final work in project I wanted to share is just a little update on my Nupullaan shawl. So it probably doesn't look much bigger to you than it did last time, and that's simply because I entirely frogged it and started over. I wasn't enjoying the baubles. I wasn't enjoying making them, and I wasn't enjoying the look of them. So I went ahead and just frogged it and started over, and I'm making a very, very minimalist little bauble that is just, it's so small that I think it just does the job of filling that space in the pattern without being like this thing that's protruding from the fabric. So I'm happy with that. This pattern has, kind of like long stalks of leafy material, which is what I'm working on. And then it has big flowers at the top. So I'll do like big baubles up on the top flowers, I think. But I'm finding a lot more joy with it, just a little more minimal. And finally, another tale from the frog pond. I was working on the pattern Abdurraqib, which was a pair of fingerless gloves that were 2 color work, and I just frogged them. I realized that I had too many things I wanted to change or fix about the pattern, and it just wasn't bringing me joy, and my color combination was not doing anything for me that I wasn't getting out of these delightful blue mittens. And I would much rather make another pair of these than stick with a pattern that I'm just having to adjust. And I think that's just that's reality, and that's growing up, is knowing when to cut your losses, right? Okay, so I've given you a couple of I've shown a couple of tutorial-esque video and photo snippets just showing how I make a cake out of 2 strands with even tension, how I'm like mixing colors and just doing color play work for my Towy mittens. and how I mended that sleeve cuff. But I had one more thing to kind of maybe give you some inspiration. It's not really a tutorial, but I wanted to talk about something I've been doing. So a lot of times, you know, people create like make nines, or they have like big, you know, Pinterest boards or something for like wardrobe inspiration. And I saw, so I'm part of the Slack group that Mackenzie of M to the Third Yarn Co. has. And one of the other makers on there was showing how she just drew pictures and like illustrated some of the things she wanted to make to kind of visualize how they would go together or go with other things in her wardrobe. And I thought that was such a great idea, because I think, you know, one of the reasons I'm making so many blue things this year is that I have so much blue in my wardrobe, and blue looks great with more blue. And that's what I want to wear all the time. And lately I feel like I only want to wear like blue, purple, and like some neutral colors, and like, you know, maybe some shades that are adjacent to it, but that's sort of where I'm at. And so I took out some colored pencils and I started to just kind of draw some of the things that I wanted to make in the future. I don't know, some of them are things I've already made. Some of the, like, here are my pants and here's the sweater that I'm wearing right now. Here are the Towy mittens. Here is a wool skirt, which we won't talk about because it came out very badly. And then, you know, here's just like a ready to wear dress that I own. And then here's some projects that I already have the materials for. Here's my Solverv, right? I have some fabric for a dress that I'm, you know, considering which pattern to use, but essentially I just kind of drew them all, and it really gave me a lot of insight into like how I could combine these. So my next step, I think, is I'm going to actually do like individual drawings and then cut them out like paper dolls. I'm gonna make a paper doll of myself, and I'm going to make paper clothes of the things I already have, and then some paper clothes of the things that I'm considering making, because I find that a lot of wardrobe activities require you to like pull everything out, throw it on your bed, start pairing outfits, take photos, and that feels like way too much work, and then you have to put it all away. So what I'm just gonna do is make essentially a paper doll and some paper clothes, and then I can start to choose and whittle down from all the projects that I want to make, whittle down based on, well, what would I want to have first, and what do I think will be most important to you know, make as it goes with the other things. So for example, one of the other reasons I am working on my Solverv shawl first is that even though I always see sweater patterns that I want to cast on, I actually have a lot of sweaters. You know, I have ready to wear sweaters, I have my hand knitted sweaters, and then with my hand knitted sweaters, the favorite ones I tend to wear again and again and again. Like this one, I wear a lot. I have a gray cozy classic raglan that I wear a lot. I wear my Weekender light a lot, you know. So if it was, you know, really about what do I need in my wardrobe and what do I want to be able to have, I think I don't need sweaters right away. So even though I have sweaters on the needles, like they can wait, right? I'm going to focus on getting my shawls done, because what I don't have is a lot of, you know, like scarves. And it's so funny because I feel like, you know, scarves get such a bad rap as like a beginner project, but I've almost thought about like, why don't we keep knitting like a garter stitch scarf after we become experienced knitters, right? Why do people become, what makes a person decide, oh, I'm only gonna knit sweaters now? Because I see that a lot. I see people who make just sweaters. Maybe they make sweaters and shawls, or they make like, sweaters and socks, and I can understand making a lot of socks because you need a lot of socks. I can understand making a lot of hats if you live in a cold climate, or mittens or something, you know, where it's like you can never have too many mittens, right? You can't, because they get dirty, they get beat up, they wear out faster. But sweaters, I feel like if you are taking care of them, they last for a very long time. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't understand, like, why do people get sort of stuck on something where it's like, you know, yeah, I don't know. And I find that scarves and cowls bring me a lot more joy than hats in terms of keeping my ears warm, keeping my head warm. I don't know. So yeah, so paper doll it up if you are trying to figure out, like, how do I narrow down my queue, essentially, or all my favorite things that I want to make. And I think maybe you'll start to see, like, these are things that could go with, you know, what I have. And then you can also start to look at, you know, what do I have the yarn for? And what, you know, what do I need first? And so that becomes another way if you're trying to stop yourself from just stockpiling stuff, because it's so much. Of course, you can dream knit faster than you can actually knit. All right, it's time for book talk. I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks because I've been wanting to give my eyes a rest from the blue light. So I have concealer on and I still have, like, dark circles under my eyes, and I take vitamin D. So it's definitely a phone, looking at my phone, looking at my computer screen thing, and just probably needing to get outside more, get some fresh air and sunshine, even though it's 5 degrees or whatever. So I've been listening to audiobooks more, and I intend to keep doing that. I've also found, and I've talked about this before, audiobooks are a great way to get through the kind of heavy duty or more academic nonfiction stuff that I like to read. So the first audiobook I read, which I have the paperback of, but I just wasn't reading it, is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. This is a really great book. For me, it was kind of a mindfulness thing because residential segregation is a very serious, very intense thing here. And we're lucky that we landed in one of the few neighborhoods that's very diverse. So yeah, so I've been interested in the idea of redlining and residential segregation for a few years. And it's something that I think about more as we want to become homeowners in the near future. And also just a few years ago, I realized that the neighborhood I grew up in was very, very redlined, very, you know, the sort of neighborhood and neighboring neighborhoods were very much divided by race, ethnicity, etc. So I lived in a neighborhood that was like all either mixed race families or mixed ethnicity families or immigrants, or we were kind of like the neighborhood of all the people who didn't fit neatly into the other categories. And I always just thought we were very interesting. And it was like only a few years ago that kind of like light bulb went off, that I was like, oh, okay, that's what happened, right? So I read that book. It's not a happy book, but I think it's a hopeful book because the author is actually a lawyer who's making a legal case. And so when you actually hear him out, it's like, this is an actual case. This could be, you know, people could really benefit from this legal argument. And from it, I think he defends his case admirably, and you don't come away with, you know, any doubts whatsoever that he's correct. So yeah, I wanted to get into some like mysteries and maybe like cozy mysteries. So I I started reading or listening to a book called A is for Alibi by Sue Grafton. And, you know, it's this alphabet series of mysteries. And I thought she was a pretty good writer because I read one of her essays in a collection about knitting. But I found that there was some fat-phobic content in this book, and I wasn't, like, the first time around I went, okay, right? But then it just kind of like kept happening. And also there was some stuff that's like, I don't mind like heteronormativity, but what I really don't like is when gender stuff is like kind of creepy. So for instance, there's a character who's consistently described as sort of like this animalistic male who just exudes sexuality. And to me, that sounds like a sexual predator. Like when I hear animal, it's like, oh, here's a person who doesn't control himself or doesn't accept responsibility for his actions, right? And so that's really a turnoff for me. I don't, you know, I don't know. I feel like this is a common thing in a lot of romance and stuff. And I suppose maybe heterosexual women, you know, enjoy the thought of a man being like a beast who has no moral compass. But to me, that sounds like a criminal. So I'm not super into it. Like, yeah. It's just, so I had to like stop with that book. And then I started reading I found another audiobook that was a detective book, but it just wasn't for me. So then I remembered that somebody had told me about the cozy knitting mysteries. And so I listened to Knit 1, Kill 2 by Maggie Sefton. And that was freaking delightful. And I have to say portions of it were almost like yarn porn in a way, where it was like there would be these long descriptions of just like the inside of a yarn shop, and the way that it was like so over the top was like, if you weren't a knitter, you would be like so bored. But if you love fiber, then you're like, yeah, oh, I can visualize it. And I think it's sort of it was just kind of funny in the way that it was a little bit pornographic in the kind of the broadest sense of the term. I've also been reading, just like as my nighttime read, The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. So this is another one of his books that's got kind of like weird time travel and like multiple narrative threads that are like going to like pull together, or like, you know, different people having different stories that are kind of intertwined. And you just have to kind of go with it, and then it makes sense at the end. So if you have seen the movie Cloud Atlas, that's based on a novel that he wrote. But it's that sort of, you know, like there's all these just different stories across time and space, and they're gonna like wrap together. And the final book, oh, and I should say I'm really enjoying it. I've read another book of his. I've read Cloud Atlas, and I don't know if I've read anything else, but you know, I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm taking my time with it. I just started the audiobook A Little Devil in America by Hanif Abdurraqib, who's a poet and music critic, and it is so good so far. So it's about dance and music, Black art, joy, and sort of you know, it's kind of an ode to Black creators in America who are using dance as like art for art's sake, right? And this like the beautiful, or just the beauty of self-expression, and the way that you know, he talks about one thing that really struck me is the difference between showing off and showing out, right? That showing off is really about making an impression on other people and getting something in exchange for your talent or whatever. whereas showing out is really like that celebration of the art form. So it's so good. And because he's a poet, of course, like his writing is just really lyrical and like beautiful, and it's like I feel like I'm walking through a museum or something, and he's like a docent who's taken me by the hand and is like describing everything with love, right? Like it's yeah, if you enjoy this format where somebody who's obsessed with a thing talks about it, then you'll really like this book. So yeah, that's all I've been reading lately, and it's been really nice. I think I'm going to continue with the knitting mysteries, even though they can be a little, you know, surface level and kind of campy. I like when things are campy. Like, I like when they're self-aware of what they are. So it's kind of like Midsummer Murders, you know? It's like, it knows that it's dumb, but it's also great and brilliant because it's just that. It's just the genre, right? And it's doing what it needs to do well. So off and on, I've done a series or a portion of the show that I called The Handmaid's Tale, where I talk about handmade objects that are sometimes made by me, sometimes not, just something that has significance in my life or maybe had significance in someone else's life. And today I have such a special treat for you. I am the proud, I guess I am the humbled recipient and honored custodian of a collection of handmade objects from Satya Jones. So Satya is somebody who unfortunately passed away when I was a child. I never knew her. I never even knew of her until I happened to work with her son at a company a few years ago. So her son is not the kind of person that I would expect to come from a background of raising sheep, spinning, you know, knitting, all of that kind of stuff. But Satya and her husband were I guess kind of hippie-ish, back to the land sort of people. And they raised their kids on a sheep farm in Oregon in the 70s and 80s. And she was the founder of the Black Sheep Gathering, which is an annual fiber festival celebrating rare sheep breeds and celebrating natural undyed wool. So the whole point of this gathering was really to, you know, like many fiber festivals, bring people together who are involved in fiber, you know, or sheep raising, agriculture, animal husbandry, etc. And it's something that I didn't even know existed until, unfortunately, you know, about 2020, when all the festivals started being canceled. But just to give you a sense of who she was a shepherdess and spinner and weaver and knitter, who created this newsletter called the Black Sheep Newsletter, and then the Black Sheep Gathering. And you can, I think, order back issues of this newsletter. I'm going to get in touch and I'm going to be ordering the book that is like the collection of the first 20 newsletters. And then I'm also going to be ordering the cookbook because I want to know like what's in there, you know. But so, you know, I kind of like didn't know about her until I knew her son. And we worked together, and then, you know, kind of like as he was like getting ready to leave that company, we had lunch, and then he just like was like, oh, did I ever tell you that I grew up on a sheep farm and my parents were back to the land hippies and I grew up spinning and weaving and all this stuff? And I was like, what? Who are you? How have I known you so long and I never knew any of this? But you know, then we had, and he's not a fiber person at all. Like, as far as I know, he hasn't handled a fleece or a skein of yarn in many years. But recently he got back in touch with me and he said, you know, my father has been hanging on to a bunch of old handmade, hand knit things for a long time, and we don't know what to do with them. So do you want them? So these are like sweaters and things that his mom made in the 70s. And I was like, okay, well, now that I know who your mom is, and I know she's a legend, and I know that, you know, the gathering she created ended up being like an international phenomenon, and like, yes, I want them. Absolutely. I will find a purpose or a home for them, whatever. Yes. And so, I think when he offered that, maybe he had forgotten that I had moved to Wisconsin. So I gave him my address, and then I wasn't really expecting them to arrive, but then they did. And I have these sort of treasures that I don't really know exactly what to do with other than celebrate them, but I'm gonna show them to you. So the first is, this is my favorite piece. This is a vest knitted. What I love about it that I think is really clever is that it's knit in a very coarse, like, I think this is like Icelandic wool or something. It's something real sturdy, right? But all of the ribbing, all the edges are knit in a softer wool that feels, you know, a lot softer. And I thought, well, that makes perfect sense, because you want like a workhorse garment that actually is soft on your neck. And it's got this beautiful, like, freehand, I don't know if she drew her own charts or what, but it's got like tools on it. That, like a ladder, a hatchet, a hammer, some nails. I don't know what this thing is called. A compass? No, a protractor? I don't know. Anyway, and it's all, I think these are all undyed, because that was her whole thing, right? Was undyed wool. So this is all undyed wool, hand knitted. This thing is probably older than I am. Okay, because she died when I was 2 or 3. So, you know, she would have made this maybe before I was born, probably before I was born. And it's just like so amazing to see like what good shape it's in, right? It's obviously a very rustic wool, because there's like no pilling, even though the gauge isn't super, super dense. And it's all, you know, natural. And so I believe that she spun this as well. I believe she sheared it and skirted it and braided it and spun it and carded it and all the things. So that's the first one. This is a weaving that she did, which obviously there was some kind of dye used in this yarn, but it's a little, you know, worse for wear of time, but it is actually, again, in pretty remarkably good shape. That's the reverse side of it. And I think with a cleanup, this will be really nice on my wall. The next thing, this was really mind-boggling to me, because the more I studied it, the more I understood it. This is a coat that I'll stand up and put it on, actually, because I think you really need to see it to appreciate it. This is a coat that's made from panels of fabric that were woven. So these are woven panels of fabric, woven wool, and then the panels were sewn together to make a coat, which then was kind of given this like leather edging. I don't know if this is leather in the sense of cow leather or if it's sheep or what, but it's some kind of leather. And it has some holes in it, you know, it's not like I'm gonna wear this and it doesn't even really fit me that well, but I just wanted you to really see it, to appreciate it. It's this incredible coat, and it's, yeah, I mean, just like, wow. Okay, and then there's this sweater, which is, again, like all hand spun, undyed, natural wool. It's knitted. It's got some holes. I think some moths at one point, probably even decades ago, ate through bits of this, but this is a sweater which would totally fit me. I could wear it, but I don't know. It's not really the kind of thing I would wear, but more importantly than that even is that it feels like a piece of history, almost like a historical artifact, and so I don't want to just like wear it, you know, which I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are telling me, oh, you got to wear it, you know, just repair it and wear it, but yeah, I don't know. It just feels like too precious, especially when I have things that it's like, you know, if something really bad happened to this, I'd be sad, but like I can buy this yarn any day. You know, it's not that special. This piece, my friend said that this was one of the last things she worked on, and when he told me that, I almost started crying because it was one of a set of, I think this is punch needle, and there were two of them, and so he has the other one, and it's like this just design of a fan. I don't know if she was following a pattern or if she freehand designed it or what, but it's very pretty. It's just like even more meaningful to know that this was something that she was working on towards the end of her life. She died kind of young and unexpected because of illness. So, you know, just knowing that that was something that maybe was bringing her peace or solace or comfort at a really difficult time, that's powerful. Here's another vest that honestly, I think this was worn for a long time. I think it was worn a lot for a long time. It definitely has some pilling and some like kind of like it's been used, you know. But what's amazing about this yarn is that I can tell that you could just depill it and it would look brand new. I mean, it's solid stuff, you know, it's really solid. And I wonder too, you know, if these were something his father was hanging on to, if they were made for him and then he just stopped wearing them when he stopped raising sheep, or when he, I don't know, but they look like workwear, you know. I mean, that's the thing, is that I think other than that coat, everything seems to be like workwear, you know. It's something that looks like you could go out and like muck about with farm animals and like it would stay. And the fact that these things are nearly 40 years old and they're in such good shape really tells you that they are that it's like durable, right? And so here's the last one, and this one's probably the one in kind of the worst shape. So this is another vest, but I almost wonder if this was I don't know. I thought maybe it was a sweater that didn't get finished, but I think no, I think it was a vest, and I think it was a lady's vest actually, because there does appear to be a little bit of waist shaping. It's starting to unravel in places. It has like a purple dye stain on part of it that looks like maybe almost like an ink stain or something. But yeah, that's my segment, The Handmaid's Tale. So what an amazing thing to be gifted all of these artifacts of wool industry and Oregon history. And I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with them yet, but there will be something that is more, I'm leaning more towards display versus usage. And I certainly am not going to unravel them or anything like that. You know, that was something my friend was like, well, I don't know, could you unravel them and use the wool? But I'm like, you know, I can get wool anywhere, anytime. Like this I can't get. So I want to get in touch with the folks at the Fiber Fest, and maybe if you have any suggestions. I'm just really thinking, what would Clara Parks do? And it feels like, on the one hand, to a non-knitter, these are just some old hand knitted things that don't, you know, they're just old things that someone made once. But they feel to me more significant than that. Yeah, I think the historian in me is like, these are special, these deserve to be like honored. And so I'm gonna give them each a really gentle wash. I'm gonna try to repair what I can repair. I think I'm gonna try to do like more visible mending so that it's clear what's, you know, her work versus mine. And I'm only gonna repair them to stabilize them. Somebody recommended to me, Kate from Cream City Yarn, actually, who's really knowledgeable about fiber things, recommended that I use the Tuft Woolens bar soap because it has lanolin in it, so that will kind of condition the wool. So I'm going to be doing that, and I think I'll probably do a gentle wash before I try to repair, because then I want to see how the wool is going to be in its like best possible state. So yeah, that is that. Whew. Well, this has been a long and winding journey. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this podcast community, if I dare call it a community. My ultimate goal with this and with every video I make is that, you know, someday when travel becomes a reality again, I will be able to go anywhere and meet up with another knitter and, you know, go to a yarn shop with somebody and go to a fiber festival with somebody, etc. I love making friends in the knitting community. I love knowing what other people are working on. And yeah, if you are participating in either KAL, please let me know, and let me know how you want that to show up. I had talked about doing maybe creating a Slack workspace so people could chatter and share what they're working on. And I might do that, but I really need people to show interest in it, because I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to try to make you get on another platform that you're not enthusiastic about. So yeah, you know. And I wanted to just let you know that I'm also starting to plan another video series that would be either segments in my regular podcast or, as I suspect, separate videos. So I want to interview some makers. I've been wanting to do this pretty much since I started. I've wanted to interview other makers. But I don't, again, this is not a professional endeavor. I don't have podcasting equipment aside from a cheap tripod I got off the internet, my phone. You know, I'm not all about like professionalizing this, but I do think that I want to showcase other people and their work. So those two goals maybe feel like a little at odds with each other, but I'm trying to reconcile them. Yeah, on that note, I will bid you adieu. I think I've talked long enough, but like I said, I had a lot to share. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who said I am a natural on camera. I really am not. I had to study myself, and I had to study other podcasts to figure out like where to look when I'm talking to the camera, and how to manage my tendency to gesticulate wildly and all of that. And it's a learning process every day, but thank you for thinking that it comes easy to me. That's a really sweet compliment to get. So yeah, you know, stay playful, stay creative. I love you all, and I will see you next month. Bye.